To moderate this panel, even though it is just after lunchtime, which is not a good time slot usually, but this time I would say that we're lucky here because we're coming with a note of probably something we could call optimism after the last two panels, which were not that optimistic. So hopefully that will keep us awake after lunch. So let me start introducing the panelists, and I'll start from the left and move to the right. We'll start with, and apologies if I don't pronounce correctly, Takehiro Masutomo, who is a journalist and adjunct researcher at Waseda University in Tokyo, and the author of Zhenzhe, which is a very much talked about book about Chinese wealthy elites emigrating to China. To Japan, of course. Okay. Then on my left, we have Joyce Du, who is a multi-sectoral communications consultant and a specialist of everything design, communication, craftsmanship, with very rich experience in journalism in multiple countries, from China to probably the US, or not? Okay, no, pas encore, not yet, and probably France, let's say, with design and fashion, as I said, playing a very important role, and you will see that this is also an important angle to our discussion. And finally, last but not least, on my right, Neil Thomas, a fellow on Chinese politics at Asia Society Center for China Analysis, who is frequently published in the best publications and interviewed in major media. He works and explores elite politics and, very relevant to our topic, what we can call the nuanced relationship between formal policymaking and informal drivers of change. So that's for our panel, okay? Now, I'm delighted not only for the reasons I said to moderate this panel, but also because I really believe that we're going to be able to talk about something a little bit different, which is not so much talked about, and that hopefully will help us rethink the way we understand China. And really, it's about, actually, this is your words from yesterday, it's really about also not just talking as we usually do from afar in Western capitals, not just talking about this sort of like state control, very rigid, opaque situation and description of China, but really going into the sort of texture of lived experience and talking, as you said, Joyce, about people. People in China. Beneath the surface of the party authority, there is indeed a dynamic and a very dynamic, ever-evolving society. It's a place where generational divides are widening, where digital spaces are mutating extremely fast, even faster than they can be governed, where informal networks from student communities, underground artists, and online influencers are shaping culture in real time. And this is something we seldom have a chance to see, which is what I would like to call China from within, from inside. So let's start on this topic with a pretty broad question, which I will ask each of you. And this is really about where and how do you read these trends? And I'm not talking about the what yet. It's not about what trends. We will keep this for later. But it's really from your expertise, from your vantage point, how do you read China from the inside? What are the creative, informal, unexpected spaces, possibly, where deeper social and political dynamics are expressed? It is about the where. So I will start, it's not about the what yet. I will start with you, Hiro, and then we'll move
Okay, thank you for your kind introduction. I'm really excited to be part of this wonderful panel. I'd also like to express my big thanks to the organizers. The theme of the panel is China's internal dynamics. But unfortunately, actually, recently I dare not to visit China as a Japanese journalist. Because we don't really know where the red line is. So, yeah. But still, I'd like to contribute to the discussions by sharing my understanding of China from outside. Yeah. And I dare not to go back to China, although I have a good amount of actual savings in China. Yeah, I already gave up. Yeah. Yeah, I dare not to visit there also because I just published this book, Lun Li. Yeah, the title she introduced. Yeah. First, I would like to highlight that indeed, increasing number of Chinese people are immigrating to Japan, maybe even escaping to Japan. Interestingly, this trend has accelerated over the past few years. And this is also really interesting because this is happening despite the fact that Japan has long been seen as a kind of enemy country within China. And the turning point, of course, was the Shanghai lockdown that took place in 2022. So at least in their eyes, the situation in China has been deteriorating politically, economically, and also socially. Yeah, that's my argument. And let me start with politics. So I'm sure everybody in this room is well aware that freedom of speech is quite restricted these days in mainland China. So, for example, they could have like academic events or serious current affairs events in Beijing or even Hong Kong, but no more. So, I think Tokyo is becoming a new hub for intellectual exchanges among the Chinese. So we have witnessed also Chinese language bookstores opening one after another in Tokyo. And I also know that this Chinese publisher in Tokyo is printing simplified Chinese books there. So it's quite a significant move. And I think this phenomena proves that Chinese intellectual community in Tokyo is really dense enough. By the way, this morning I was walking from my hotel to this area, passing through this area called Montparnasse. Montparnasse, thank you for correcting my pronunciation. So I know that this district has used to attract a lot of artists from around the globe during the interwar period. And I think Tokyo is becoming a new Montparnasse for the Chinese because a lot of Chinese documentary filmmakers, painters, even singers, comedians, they are all arriving in Tokyo these days.
And I think there was I forgot if it's Le Figaro or Le Monde, which is a French newspaper, which was using a title saying that Tokyo is the new Hong Kong.
Yeah. That's actually that's my quote actually. Anyway, I said that before. Yeah. So I also think Tokyo is becoming a new Hong Kong. Yeah, in many ways. So yeah, and then economically speaking, as Professor Kikuchi mentioned in the previous session, Chinese economy is becoming like Japanese economy in a way, heading toward deflation, and clearly Chinese economy is slowing down. And the Chinese authorities becoming a bit more harsh on wealthy individuals and even tech tycoons. So that's why figures like Jack Ma spends more time these days in Tokyo. Actually, I know he visited Tokyo in late March. Maybe he was there for cherry blossom viewing or something, I don't know. He again visited Tokyo last month. Yeah, so I'm sure rich people are becoming more anxious about, uncertainties. And then they are more willing to invest in Japan. Like they are buying up a lot of high-rise condominiums in central Tokyo. And yeah, and lastly, socially speaking, I think education is a huge factor. The competition in mainland is getting fierce and fierce. Actually, education reforms have made university admissions significantly more selective. So for them, I think, Japan is like the second district. If you are on Japan track, it's much easier to get into maybe top universities in the end. And adding to that, I would also say, political education taking place in China is really a big turn-off for Chinese parents living in like big cities. I'll stop here. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. So in a way, when I ask you where do you see the expression, your answer is Japan, in the very fact of emigrating to Japan. I guess it's a little bit different for you, Joyce, and we would all be very interested in understanding where do you do your reading of these trends, knowing that your point of view is fairly different. You are more into communications, art, design, and so on and so forth.
Thank you. Such a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Duncan, and the organizers' invite. Just for the record, if my face is not on the agenda, it's because I'm filling in some very big shoes of our dear colleague, Vincent Ni. To your question, Santina, I think I should start with something very feminine and girly. I observe trends on shopping websites, including Little Red Book and Taobao. This might seem not possible, but actually that's where you notice a lot of new creativities happening in all sorts of product designs and fashion design, etc. But just following on the point that Takeshiro was making, on the education side, actually there was one of the main points I would like to address, if I may.
Of course.
For a few points. On the generation shifts that you mentioned, education, just like Takeshiro was saying, by 2023, 250 million of Chinese workforce has higher education qualifications, 250 million. Roughly 60.2% of higher education administrate, that's like when you apply for higher education, about 60% gets admitted. And this is up from 30% in 2012. And right now, China has also actively talking to different countries, to the Ministry of Education in different countries, and there are 59 countries acknowledging the qualifications, diplomas issued in China. And another interesting fact, a lot of you here, I know you may have studied in China, been to China, but rewind back to the days in 1952, in that year, 3 years after the Communist Party took power, there were 231 overseas students, which means the Chinese going abroad. This number in 1978 was 860. That was right after Cultural Revolution, 860. And in 2019, what's the guess?
No,
How much? 704,000. So in the rough years, the 40 years between 1978 to 2019, altogether there were 6.59 million Chinese students went abroad to study. Among those who have finished, completed their study, 4.2 million returned to China to pursue their career. That is two of central Paris. If you know the population, it's 2.2, right, in Paris. And of course, in COVID, the overseas studying trend took a hit. In 2020, there were 450,000 Chinese went abroad to study. But the number is picking up. In 2022, there's already 661,000 students. I make this point is that where do we see the trends in China? I think everybody should just look around. We are not being confined in that Great Wall. We are not there, not visible. We are here in front of you. If you have noticed how many new Chinese restaurants opened in Paris in the past 4 years, you would know that we are here. Another point is, you think, the social media is different, Facebook, Instagram are banned in China, but that shouldn't stop you being curious about what's happening in China. If you are on Instagram as heavily as I am, it's my guess, 50% of the cat videos you have seen are from Chinese social media. And so this is my answer to that one. And if I may, I would also, to add to that point, on the digital culture that's happening in China, the reason why there are so many Chinese cat videos on TikTok, on Instagram, is because everyone in China, almost everyone, I think it's 970 million users in China right now with a smartphone. Everybody is filming interesting things in their life. They're posting. There are savvy internet users reposting them to the social medias that you have access to. And on top of that, by the way, Little Red Book, my favorite app, where I think my screen time will be 3.5 hours per day on that single app. It has an English version. I haven't checked whether it has a French version, but please do sign up and browse through what's happening in China. To that, I would also like to say that the smartphone penetration in China ranks number 4 worldwide. But most importantly is I didn't invent this, it's digital literacy. Like, how well can you use your mobile phone and what do you do with it in daily life? My 94-year-old grandma tells me which coupon to get on the Pinduoduo app. If this is the case in France, I think the economy is a different case. So in May, there is something that was being launched called 数字中国建设2025行动方案, Digital China 2025 Action Plan, co-issued by Cyberspace Administration China and the Ministry of Education. They have a wide range of action plans, very detailed, from creating digital lifestyles to, I like this one, to building an inclusive digital society. When we think of China, we think of political control and people not having freedom. But what we don't see in China is that everybody has a phone and the digital literacy rate is really high. Somebody living in the village might be more savvy in a wealthy person living in the 6am when it comes to online shopping. I think I'll stop here. I have more to share later.
Yeah, no, sure. But I just want to make sure we control time a little bit. And in fact, maybe you can answer the first question, but at the same time, tell us a little bit, with all these signs coming from use of mobile phones, social media, viral posts, and so on and so forth. How does the leadership, the political leadership, deal with it? Because it's not so easy to govern because it goes very fast.
Thank you, Sandrine, and thank you to Asia Society France and the Salzburg Forum for putting on such an incredible event. And thank you to all of you for attending and looking forward to some questions and discussion later. You ask a great question, Sandrine, because there is an assumption that Xi Jinping, the Communist Party, don't care about public opinion, don't care about the Chinese people and what they think. And from one perspective, sure, that's true. They are acting in their interests and how they see the country should be governed. But from another perspective, it's much easier to be an authoritarian leader, to be an authoritarian party, if you know what's going on in your own country. One of the big problems that has confronted the Communist Party for decades has been working out just what is happening at the grassroots. And this is actually something that explains part of Xi Jinping's centralization agenda, part of his desire to launch these anti-corruption, party discipline campaigns. It's part of it is political, obviously, beating down rival factions, but part of it's also getting a better grip on what's happening in the literally hundreds of thousands of villages, tens of thousands of townships, 2,500 counties all around the country. Like, it's difficult to govern China. And so from a kind of, looking from Zhongnan High Leadership Compound out, one of the functions of this party discipline campaign has been to just gather information about the performance of local officials, to crack down on corruption, but also to govern the country better. I mean, part of why the Communist Party is still around is that, yes, they have a sophisticated apparatus of censorship, propaganda, and repression. But another part of it is that they have genuinely improved the lives of 1.4 billion Chinese people. And there's obviously a lot of variation there. A lot of people would say their lives have suffered a lot under the Communist Party. But overall, I mean, the economic data, as Professor Huang was saying, it's not necessarily 100% accurate, but the broad brushstrokes of that story is true. And now, kind of that the problems are becoming more and more that the party needs to solve, and more granular. And so getting that information from the grassroots, from the public, is becoming more important. And like a lot of government websites now have portals where Chinese citizens can submit their complaints, can submit their feedback on local officials. You won't necessarily get listened to, but that information is there, and it's not being collected for no reason. It's being collected so the party can solidify its rule the party better, and maintain its leadership of China.
Now, that's very interesting. So basically, it's very different from what Westerners tend to perceive. Here, you are telling us that obviously when it's going too far, or a direction which is really not acceptable, it's just purely censored. But it's also, for the rest, simply integrated, observed and integrated in the policy making, which I think this is probably something new to some of us here. And to some extent, I'd like to turn to you again. How does this work when it's expressed abroad? When you have some sort of a soft criticism by artists or craftsmen, which is expressed on foreign platforms, is there a tendency of the leadership to do some sort of appropriation, if it makes sense to you, so basically, or cooptation, whatever you like to call it? I mean, do you have any example of this?
I have to unpack the question a little bit on this one. Like, in the past, let's say, decade, what happened is that the Chinese government side has quite a lot of funding to fund them, like the soft power going abroad. But then there's the independent art scene that's happening, from craftsman, design, and fashion, dance, from different areas. But what happens, I also have to rewind back a little bit, that this young generation of creators, they are born in a different political context. A lot of them are born in the 1990s, in the 2000s. So some of the key historical events, they were not there and they don't know much about it. They don't feel the same level of repression like artists, for example, Ai Weiwei, would have experienced or felt. So I consider this new generation of creators, they have a lot of liberty and innate motivation to create. Then the government, do they criticize, do they monitor? I don't think there's much, because what I call the lack of aesthetics of the current regime actually allowed the flourishing of many young talents.
Mm-hmm. Okay, interesting. And Hiro, in Japan, what do you see in terms of more, because you talked to us quite a bit on education, on economic motivations, but what do you see in terms of political expression or cultural expression that really clearly demonstrate that there is an aspiration for a different lifestyle choice?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I would say these newcomers from China are really, I don't know if I'm answering to your question, but enjoying really lifestyle in Japan. Mm-hmm. So they are flocking to Tokyo because, it offers really amazing cost effectiveness at the same time, mm-hmm. Compared with other global cities. So, well, some of these newcomers, they really simply just, enjoy living in a, foreign country.
But do you see any more clear expression of disagreements with the Chinese leadership?
Oh, that's a good point. That's, I think, what we need to watch out for in the coming years, maybe even decades, because, I think there's now, interestingly, there's an attempt in Japan to even cultivate the second Sun Yat-sen. Sun Yat-sen spends significant amount of time in Japan. And there were, during the late Qing period, many Chinese revolutionists stayed in Tokyo. And similarly, many intellectuals are now gathering in Tokyo, and there's this attempt. And I think interesting thing could happen when and if wealthy Chinese people and intellectuals come to join forces. It could become really a political, power. So,
Mm-hmm. Okay, very interesting. So I'm a little bit conscious of time, so maybe I'm going to ask you a very direct question that maybe you want to sort of answer a bit shortly, and then we will take the rest of time for something a bit longer, which is simply, if you had to name only one signal that, or, among all these signals we mentioned until now, that we should really pay attention to, because you believe that this signal, this trend, is going to make a huge difference, or at least a significant difference, in shaping the future of China, what would it be? And maybe I start with you, Neil.
Well, I'm a student of Chinese politics, so to my mind, China, in the words of my good friend and brilliant Chinese historian of Chinese politics, Joseph Torigian, China's a very leader-friendly system. So to my mind, the biggest source of change in China is going to come from the top. And we need to be careful not to confuse China's political present with China's political future. Because, the only constant over modern Chinese history is change. At the end of the Mao era, few people saw Deng Xiaoping's Reform and Opening coming. The end of the Hu Jintao era, we know a lot of even Chinese party elites did not see Xi Jinping's so-called new era coming. So, if anyone tells you that they know what's going to happen in Beijing in 20 years' time, I've got a very famous French tower that I'd love to sell you. So I think we need to be conscious that that there's a lot of dynamism in Chinese society, but ultimately, the biggest window for change in Chinese society is going to come from politics. And you go to China, you talk to people in different think tanks, different institutes that advise the government, and there are 100 million party members. They do not all think alike. There is a diversity of viewpoints about what national rejuvenation should look like and the best way to get there. You go to one think tank and it's all economic technocrats who used to work for Wen Jiabao and Li Keqiang, and they're telling you about their hopes for rural land reform. You go to another think tank down the road and it's people yelling at you about US alliances in Asia and getting out of the Taiwan Strait. So there's a diversity of views within the party, and we don't know when China will have, when the Communist Party will have new leadership, but we know that at some point it will. And I think that to me is kind of the biggest juncture for change across Chinese society, politics, economy, diplomacy, and something to always bear in mind is going to be an inevitability going forward.
Well, thank you for pointing this, because a lot of people, at least in the West, a lot of people do not have any idea of this diversity in the party itself, and I think it's very important that you point to this. So for Hero, I suppose that it's very clear, because Sun Yat-sen, the new Sun Yat-sen will come from Tokyo. Is that correct?
Possibly, yeah.
But I mean, again, if you were to really observe or point one signal that is really important to pay attention to.
So thank you. So I have been talking about this phenomenon, run or run away from China. This is a global trend, not just about Japan. Although, I believe Tokyo is currently really the epicenter of this movement of people. I think, looking forward, I think it's interesting to see if there will be a lot of run or second run. So I know some Chinese people are not happy with what's unfolding in the DC, Washington, and some are choosing to leave the US for better. And actually, Japanese people are also becoming aware of Chinese real estate spree taking place. So it's now becoming a bit of a political issue in Japan. So I think Chinese people will continue looking for optimal destination. So according to shifts in immigration policies. So I think that's what we should pay attention to going forward.
Interesting. Okay. What about you, Joyce? Which signal should we pay special attention to?
This is a perfect question, because that was the point I failed to have time to express.
Okay.
I would really like to convince all of you to be conscious of the level of exposure to Chinese design in your daily life, from fashion to your utilities. Oh, I have some lists. Like, I was in Bordeaux last weekend, and my Uber driver came with a BYD car with flashy lights, like blinking eyes. And this is Chinese design next to your doorstep. And in your home, probably you have your internet router, and usually it's TP-Link. And that's your Chinese design. And even when you get your home surveillance system, your cat feeder, sorry, I keep going back to cats. If you can't find anything of Chinese design, take a look at your phone case. Most likely they are also designed in China. But these are small examples. There are much bigger trends that's happening in architectural design. The government funding, private funding, as most of you know, all the many museums and galleries that had happened in the past 15 years invited numerous internationally known architects, but also many domestic ones. And product design, as I've mentioned, and fashion itself, again, from haute couture that's happening right now in Paris to independent brands. But what you really should take a look at is, are the Little Red Book are the Taobao designers. Nobody know about them, but their product sometimes sells millions that you would never imagine how much they sell on a day. And now visual design, I think China is going through a phase to create a new identity. When you think of China, the font in your head, the colors in your head, had nothing to do with China today. I think Chinese people, as we are also gradually constructing a new identity. And this identity, thanks to the many overseas Chinese, including myself, and the ones returned to China, there's a big element of fusion in it. And this can be expressed in every way of creation.
That's very interesting, but let me ask you a question. Is this progressively, do you see signs that it is progressively changing the perception that the rest of the world has about China? As you said, we are exposed to Chinese design all day long without always being aware of it. But do you see signs that we're starting to change our views in China?
I might say something slightly offensive to the majority of this group. Being Chinese, I'm super proud of the insatiable curiosity and creativity of this nation. To change the perception is not on us to change how the world sees us. It depends on how every single person living in Europe, living in the US, how willing are they to change the way they look at us. So I would pose the challenge back to, for example, the organizer of Milan Design Week. Are they really seeing us differently? Are they giving us the enough exposure that we should deserve?
Yeah, well, we're not going to debate this, but it's certainly on both ways because it's also in the interest of China to improve its soft power.
Yeah, but in this way, soft power, again, like exists in many ways. I don't know, like in film industry, how many of you are familiar? In Hollywood, that like in each animation studios, the majority are Chinese animators. And now China, with the Naja film, we are demonstrating how strong we are in this field. But like, I feel the new generation of Chinese, even though I'm a bit older than that, but I would like to believe that in a way we will quietly change the perception by making more and more design, by creating more and more, I don't know, confidence products.
I understand. I think that sorry to interrupt. To start with, I think people are aware that, for instance, Chinese electric vehicles are from China, and they like this Chinese electric vehicle a lot, so that could be a good starting point. Sorry, I interrupted.
Say the European Commission has a much different view on
sure.
Chinese electric vehicles.
We're
coming straight from Brussels.
We're talking about people.
On that point, I mean, I think it is, to what Joyce, I think, was getting at, it's just really important as well, you know, not to confuse the Chinese government with the Chinese people, right? I mean, the Chinese government, like every government, is open to scrutiny, and there's a lot to criticize there when it comes to, you know, China's human rights record, how it organizes internal politics, Chinese diplomacy, military modernization. But, you know, we really can't let that, you know, the government's actions, you know, interfere with how we view Chinese people in Western societies, Chinese students, scholars, anyone really, right? I mean, we have to, you know, actually live the rights, the freedoms, the democracy that make Western systems, in my view, you know, as a Westerner, so special. We can't just tar everyone with the same brush and be suspicious of everyone and everything from China, because, so I was getting at my previous response, you know, there's official China, and then there's, you know, 1.4 billion Chinese people.
Exactly.
And that's not just the official line of one Chinese story. We can't fall for that. There's 1.4 billion stories, and we have to try to listen to them all.
And sorry, just to add one quick sentence, Neil, thank you for mentioning that. And this is another point I would like to share is, you know, I love France. I love the UK where I live. You have so much freedom to debate on politics, to share your opinions, and sometimes to bring influence to the results. But Chinese people, I do not feel sorry per se that we don't have the opportunity to participate in any substantive conversation to bring to true results, because there's nothing we can change. However, we did save a lot of time in reading about it, in debating about it, sharing what we believe like dissident messages about it. And sometimes like new people being to China for the first time might be slightly surprised at how little politics we talk on daily basis. It's about consumerism, it's about what's fun. And I feel like this saved energy could be used in a different way, like another way of expression from the people level.
That said, I mean, some of the very best observers of Chinese politics are in China and operating anonymously because clearly the Chinese government does not allow for the free discussion of politics within its borders. Yeah. So I would blame the Chinese government for that one. And yeah, but I mean, to the point I was making as well, some of the absolute best resources, the best experts on Chinese politics are Chinese graduate students in the United States, and I imagine in Europe as well. Many of whom I've made my colleagues at Asia Society, and that's yet another reason why cutting off educational exchanges with China is not in our interest. The more we know, the more we learn about China, the better we're going to be able to make policy about China. So I think that's an important perspective too.
Thank you very much, and thank you because sort of you gave us a very nice conclusion. I was about to say introduction. A very nice conclusion. In fact, I hope that this discussion, now we're going to open to questions, but I hope this discussion we've just had conveyed the sense of diversity that is very often not perceived when we live very far away from China. And I think everybody here, coming from very different point of view, gave me at least this very strong sense of diversity. Now, questions. So I need someone to go around with a mic. Is there a mic around? Yeah, okay, great. No, there is no mic. I'll give you mine. I think there is a very energetic person.
Am I not the very energetic person? No, sorry. I'm still going to ask a question if that's okay. Yasheng Huang this morning talked about this contradiction that we see between China being more and more a tech superpower while being more and more economically depressed. Dan Wang called sort of the central contradiction. And my question would be to which extent this central contradiction is being discussed within Chinese politics and Chinese society today, and also if you can talk about which feelings this sort of generates in the Chinese population. Is this something that people notice? I hear often that sort of being in China right now feels a little bit like living in the future compared to other countries, which I assume is a nice feeling. But then you also hear a lot about sort of younger generations becoming less ambitious because they don't see any economic prospects. So what does this central contradiction do with people in China? I'm aware there's many people in China, it's not going to be the same for everybody, but I assume that discussion happens to some extent.
I guess the question was anybody.
Yeah, it could be anybody.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of contradictions in China, I guess. And I mean, yeah, if you go to Shanghai, it's probably the most modern metropolis in the entire world. But, if you go a few hundred kilometers away to rural Anhui, you have, people in, the 300 million that Yasheng mentioned who are still living off the land as rural peasants, to use the Communist Party's own translation of Nongmin. So, yeah, I mean, there's a certain part of China that is very much living in the future, but then there's this whole big complex country where there's huge regions and huge groups of people who I think feel a long way away from that, and that's where some of the social frustrations come in. There's been some great art made about it in China. There's I don't know if he's particularly well known, but Henan rap god, Henan Shuochang Zhishen, has a great song called Gongchang, like factory, that is all about the malaise and frustration of living in the factory towns, kind of process the rare earths, for example, that are driving China's geopolitical power, but with a huge amount of human cost of the people working there and the communities that are being affected or perhaps being left behind because their particular industry is being superseded by the industries of the future. So it's a very hard question to have a succinct answer to, but those are my rambling thoughts in response.
Okay, so I have a mic, so I'd like to ask a similar question to Neil, because you mentioned during your presentation, I'm here, sorry, but I have many things to do, it's difficult to stand up. So you mentioned about the fact that the party, that Xi Jinping should know what is going on in a grassroots, in different provinces. So we can assume that he knows what is going on. So my question is, I have been asking this question for the last few months, because for me it's very difficult to understand why, assuming that Xi Jinping knows what is going on when it comes to the people, when it comes to the income, that it is a problem with the spending. So why Xi Jinping does not want to introduce the reform to boost domestic consumption? Because I think because this is the solution both to the domestic problems but also to the problems globally. Just to boost domestic consumption, so it will be less overcapacity, it will be also easier to cooperate with other countries. So why he doesn't want to introduce if he knows what is going on in a grassroots level? Thank you.
Great question, and lots of moving parts there. The first thing to say is that I don't think Xi Jinping does actually know everything that's going on. He spends a lot of time complaining about how awful his grassroots cadres are, and they need to spend more time learning about the new development concept, and they're stuck in these old ways of thinking about promoting short-term growth and not implementing his version of structural reform. So still a huge amount of informational challenges, despite the much more authoritarian, centralized politics under Xi Jinping, which just goes to the problems of governing a country of that scale, right? When it comes to the consumption issue, I think consumption is formally a priority of China's economic policy, and in some sense, they do want to increase consumption. There's been all these documents coming out of the State Council over the last couple of years. But they have a lot of priorities, right? You look at the third plenum decision about economic reform last year, and it's 50 pages long or something, 100 pages long, and there's dozens and dozens, hundreds of different priorities. And I think the core of my response would be that for Xi Jinping, and I think also the broader Chinese leadership, there's a higher priority being placed on national security and making sure China's economy is resilient to geopolitical pressure from the United States and from Western allies, and that's seen as being more of an existential challenge than low consumption and all the problems associated with that.
Can I add a few words, maybe also related to the previous question? I myself had worked for this Chinese media outlet, Caixin, one of the leading financial and economics media outlet, and I know how the mood of inside newsroom has changed over the past decade. When I was still in Beijing, Caixin could have reported any economy-related news, but toward the second term of Xi Jinping, it's getting even tighter. Sometimes you cannot report about economy freely. So I don't know if the top leader is really listening to diverse voices. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, this question, the last one, remind me of what Gary was saying this morning. Gary from Qiming Venture Partners, that he mentioned that the Chinese government doesn't do central planning, they're centrally reactive, which I truly agree. And I think the example I've just shared of the Digital China 2025 plan is a way of building the potential for future consumption. And in China, how do I put it, the way the Chinese government has moved everything, to WeChat on mini program. Now you don't need to call people, you don't need to go there, you can get many things sorted. Some of you travel to China, you will know that this helps you in many ways. But for the bigger society, this level of efficiency building takes time. China is a huge country. And if you have dealt with any French notaire, you would know how complicated the system is here in France. And it was very complicated in China as well. I feel that there are groundwork being done willingly or centrally, but some changes are going to happen, but I agree with what Neil was saying. The government has a lot of priorities. This aging population is a very big priority right now. We are enjoying a rare phase of stability, seemingly okay economy. We are not crumbling to the floor. But when this generation grows old, when my mom needs to find a senior home, I think that will be the time that the government would really act in a more aggressive way.
Interesting.
Hi, thank you very much for the panelists. My name is Sacha Courtial from the Jacques Delors Institute. I would like to ask about the influence of the unemployment rate, because the unemployment rate is quite high, especially for young people, about 16% in the official data. This is on one hand, and on the other hand, the higher education in China is now massive, so we have millions, and it's adding up every year, millions of very well young educated people in China that might not be as willing as older generation to work in manufacturing sector, etc. So this situation might nurture a lot of frustration, and I would like to ask you, how do you see this affecting the Chinese society at the moment? Thank you.
Okay.
I'll just say quickly that, yeah, I think unemployment is even more of a concern for China's leaders than the economic growth rate, because unemployment is very directly tied to political concerns about social stability, right? People without a job are much more likely to get out on the streets and protest, right? And that's, the bottom line for not just the top leadership, but, every local official and their, annual evaluations. If you have a big protest on your watch, that's one strike. You're not going to get promoted, basically. So I think it's, it's something that the party keeps a very close eye on, and it's something that is, going to be, it's going to be the focus of a lot of security policy as well as economic policy, right? And it's also a reason why it's going to be difficult to address the overcapacity problem from a Chinese domestic politics point of view, because like a lot of these, say, provincially funded companies that are making okay EVs, but they're one of, 80 EV companies across China, they employ a lot of people. And getting that overcapacity down to zero, or excess capacity, whatever you want to call it, is potentially going to put a lot of people out of work. So it's going to be a slow process. I mean, actually, China's leadership do want to address that because it's just costing so much money, and they want to, reallocate some capacity to, other industries. Yeah, we've already won the EV battle, basically, but there's, there's biotech, there's all these other things that are coming online, and, they want to kind of win the industries of the future too. So basically, yeah, I mean, if unemployment starts becoming a big problem, then that's, potentially going to push China to either crack down harder on civil society and organizing, or perhaps to consider more fiscal stimulus, which is kind of the preferred way of dealing with economic problems. It just helps you kick the can down the road on structural reforms, and that's basically been Xi's response to a lot of difficult problems over the last few years.
Yeah, and if I could add maybe a few words, from Japan's perspective, I think we are witnessing influx of Chinese workers to Japan as well. Actually, right now, 10% of Chinese people living in Japan are in IT sectors, working as engineers. So that's a pretty big portion. And also, Japanese graduate schools are really attractive to those unemployed Chinese students, because Japan is facing serious depopulation issue, and yeah, after graduation, your job is almost guaranteed. So yeah.
Sorry, just one.
Can you bring the mic here for the next and probably last question? Helen was asking. Okay,
Thank you.
before that,
I think that's a really great question, and thank you for your observation. This contract is interesting, but there are several elements I would like to raise. First of all, when I was growing up in the 90s, I was in high school, and that was when the big reforms of state-owned enterprises happened. My hometown is Tianjin, and it's a heavy industry city, and I've lived through like people sitting on the street protesting, blocking my school, like the bus to go to school, and that moment passed. And I'm amazed how did they get resolved? What are these people doing today? Then back to the situation now, there's a second element, is that the automation and the use of technology, AI in production industry is astronomical. James, my previous boss, his podcast, if you haven't listened to it, please do, Tectonic. He talks about the progress of technology in Chinese industries. The proportion of hard labor being needed now and in the future will be different. And the higher educated people, when they are not being employed, there's not one way they have to do labor work, no. And back to the point of creativity, there are new kinds of work being created. There are new ways of creating jobs. So the Chinese, as far as I know, and I think I represent one of them, we don't wait to get the unemployment allowance and going to the council every day waiting for that money. We try different ways of make a living. Why? Because our social system is not secure enough to look after us. Then we have to do it. Hence, I'm moderately less pessimistic than what the number suggests.
Hi. Perfect segue there, Joyce. Thank you. My question is really like a vibe check, right, on the sentiment of 00后 and 10后 youth. I think, when you looked at data, there's of folks who feel more optimistic about their future than their parents. In the US, it's somewhere in like the low 40s%. And then in Europe, blend of Germany and France, it's somewhere in the low teens. So where do the, Chinese young population, 00后, 10后, where do they sit in terms of percentage of optimism towards the future? You touch on some, because you're really tapped into, 小红书 and Red Note and all the youth culture, right? But like, what does that look like? Because I think in the West, all the narratives that we get fed are a lot about 躺平 and that generation of not wanting to engage with employment. So I want to get maybe as much, accurate as possible, a read on what that actually looks like and whether or not they're optimistic.
Thank you for that. I don't have any statistics with me on the level of happiness, but I have very first-hand observation that I spent quite a lot of time in France. When it comes to the sense of happiness, I think the French and us, we have a very different way of evaluating how happy we are on a daily basis. That being said, that I feel the 00后, the 10后, for your information, those who were born in the year 2000 and 2010s, I haven't observed from my relatives and younger generations the sense of just not having hope. And I think that's a big ask for a Chinese person, just not to feel hopeful. As a journalist, I was a journalist for 7 years in China covering the 2008 Wenchuan earthquake, was there at the epicenter. Even when 82,000 people died from that disaster, when I was interviewing people, the Sichuan people, they are amazing. They have a crumbled house behind them, and they were playing mahjong in front of that, waiting for rescue to come. I would doubt that the 2000 year, the later generations will just give up. I do not feel that's coming. But when it comes to motivations of self-realization, I actually feel this generation is more hopeful than the generations of my parents and my grandparents living through the state economy when their life was deprived of choices from day one. This generation, they are more self-aware, they're more well-educated, and I hope we will all provide more choices for these talented young people.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So my name is Jérémy André. I'm a reporter for Le Point, one of the main weekly news magazines in France. And